Let's affirm the mission of our church as followers of Jesus.
We put love first.
Please be seated. We come now to a time of centering ourselves and opening our hearts to the presence of the Spirit. Let us prepare for a time of quiet openness.
As we come to this time, just want to lift up what many of you have talked to me about, which are the concerns you have for the upcoming election and the anxiety that so many of us are feeling and the uncertainty and all of the things that have us stirred up. So I just want you to take a moment and look around this room at the resources we have as fellow sojourners in the faith, that we are here with one another to support one another. So even beyond this mystery of life that we pause to acknowledge this day, don't overlook the fact that we are here for one another through this crazy time. So let's make sure to call upon one another when we need to in the coming days. And as we enter into this time of quiet, I encourage you to, if you're comfortable, putting your feet flat on the floor and scooching back in your chair, maybe opening your palms as a sign of being receptive, or folding your hands in prayer, or holding the hands of a loved one, whatever helps you bracket out this time. Set it aside to be still, to notice your breathing. As we breathe in and breathe out, quietly settling into this moment and letting the distractions of our lives settle into quiet, setting aside the distractions, setting aside the concerns. And as we continue to breathe in and breathe out, reminded that that mystery of life is like our breath, so often taken for granted, and yet the source of all we are, and our ability to move from one moment to the next. And so as we quiet ourselves, we join together in singing our centering song, the words of which you'll find on the screen.
With love and caring on,
there is God, where love and caring on, there is God. Let's continue with our unison act of awareness you'll find on the screen. Here we gather. We're not down, we're not out, but many of us are hurting. This vulnerability sits like an open wound, and every new hit jars it. We breathe through it, lean into it, listen for what the pain has to tell us. Lend us quiet that allows us to hear the harmonies of the universe, that let us know, even in this as we are, that we have a place in the order of things. Lend us space that allows us freedom for those things that are tight to loosen, those thoughts and events moving too quickly, time to slow so that we can look and see them clearly. Lend us peace that allows us grace to tell the difference between our internal and external insecurities, our own and also of those around us. There is much that is unknown, even the source of life that sustains us every day. But for the glimpses of truth, we are grateful. May we be open to being led, taught, and sent to put love first in the world. This is our prayer. And as we gather as emissaries of love, as practitioners of compassion, as seekers after justice, as those who intentionally open ourselves to the suffering and vulnerabilities of others so that we might be genuinely engaged in the world and not simply spectators. We're grateful for the awareness of that mystery that sustains us as we seek to live into the vision that Jesus has set in each of our lives, and that each of us have been gifted in ways unique in the universe to fulfill that call to put love first and to be on about transforming the world, even in ways that may seem small, but are nevertheless planting seeds that will continue to be nurtured by others, and that over time will continue to shape and empower, to heal, to transform others and the world. We come grateful for our lives, that we come to this moment as products of challenges and suffering, of decisions made that caused us grief and joy, acknowledging that so much in our life is a practice, as a function of our having been in the right place at the right time. Grateful for the privileges that we have. And longing for the Spirit to work its way in our hearts and minds in moments like this, to remind us that that privilege is for a purpose. So in this time of quiet, we set aside all of the distractions that keep us from being present to this moment, so that we might, in quiet ways, sense the nudging of the Spirit, the still small voice, the peace that we long for. The purpose that we seek. So that as we come to the end of our time together this day, having opened ourselves to the Spirit, that none of us would leave this place unchanged. We gather now with open hearts, open minds, open to the Spirit in this place.
We are going to have a live mission moment this morning. So I want to invite you during the Sundays of November to participate in the Table of Plenty. The Fountains has done this for many years. We start collecting non-perishable food and hygiene items that will be taken then on November 24th to Extended Hands Food Bank. But they will start to make their appearance all around our communion table. All of the cereal and soups and all the things that you're going to bring that will help people at this time in their lives with a little extra food for those who so badly need it. So whatever Sunday you choose, just come and bring your food, and there'll be somebody up here that will help arrange it around the table. Thank you in advance for all that you're going to be giving, because we are still learning about the volunteer opportunities at Extended Hands. We think we have to go through some training, so we're going to find out a little bit more about that and then let you know.
Thanks.
At the Fountains, we embrace a community where seekers, skeptics, and followers of Jesus collaborate to create a more just and peaceful world. One of the ways that we express our gratitude for the abundant gifts of life is through our financial support of the Fountains. Our ushers will be gathering your donations, or simply drop them in the one of the pigs at each one of the exits. Alternatively, you can give electronically by using the QR code displayed on the screen, or by accessing the links provided in the weekly eStreams. May we give with joy, knowing that we are actively seeking out Jesus' calling on our lives. Thank you for your generous support.
Another turning point, a fork stuck in the road. Time grabs you by the wrist, directs you where to go. So make the best of this test and don't ask why. It's not a question, but a lesson learned in life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. So take the photographs, still frames in your mind. Hang it on a shelf in good health and good time. Tattoos of memories, dead skin on the trial. For what it's worth, it was worth all the while. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. Unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. It's something unpredictable, but in the end is right. I hope you had the time of your life. I hope you had the time of your life. I hope you had the time of your life. I hope you had the time of your life. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because God's given Jesus Christ the Son. And now let the weak say I am strong, and the poor say I am rich, because of what the Lord has done for us. Give thanks with a grateful heart. Give thanks to the Holy One. Give thanks because God's given Jesus Christ the Son. Give thanks.
Please be seated.
Our words of wisdom this morning are from 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. Now the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines, and many fell on Mount Gilboa. The Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abinadab and Malchishua, the sons of Saul. The battle pressed hard upon Saul. The archers found him, and he was badly wounded by them. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through it, so that these uncircumcised may not come and thrust me through and make sport of me." But his armor-bearer was unwilling, for he was terrified. So Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. After the death of Saul, when David had returned from defeating the Amalekites, David remained 2 days in Ziklag. On the third day, a man came from Saul's camp with his clothes torn and dirt on his head. When he came to David, he fell to the ground and did obeisance. David said to him, "Where have you come from?" He said to him, "I have escaped from the camp of Israel." David said to him, "How did things go? Tell me." He answered, "The army fled from the battle, but also many of the army fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan also died." Then David asked the young man who was reporting to him, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan died?" The young man reporting to him said, "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa, and there was Saul leaning against his spear while the chariots and the horsemen drew close to him. When he looked behind him, he saw me and called to me and and I answered, 'Here, sir.' And he said to me, 'Who are you?' I answered him, I am an Amalekite. He said to me, 'Come, stand over me and kill me, for convulsions have seized me, and yet my life still lingers.' So I stood over him and killed him, for I knew that he could not live after he had fallen. I took the crown that was on his head and the armlet that was on his arm, and I have brought them here to my Lord." Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church.
Thanks be to God.
Good morning. It is indeed my pleasure and delight to be here with my good friend David Felton. I guess it's spanned at least 10, 15 years now. Has it been that long? Yes, indeed. And as a colleague in this movement of progressive Christianity, I'm always excited to share with colleagues, because you know what? It's lonely out there. It's lonely out there. So we check in with each other to make sure I'm not crazy. Are you crazy? I'm not crazy.
I'm not sure we're the right people to be checking.
Well, you know, that's how it is. But yeah, so I am very thrilled to be here in this church that has embraced this movement of progressive Christianity. And we are fighting the good fight in Carlsbad, the good people at Pilgrim United Church of Christ. One day we're going to have to do a joint mission trip together. You know, last year we took a group of 20 people from our church on what I called a anti-racism mission trip. Or actually the full title was an anti-racism reverse mission trip, because we weren't going to teach, we were going to learn. And we went to Montgomery, Alabama, and it was fascinating. And so this year we're going back with a sister congregation in San Diego, but not until the fall. And so maybe next fall you all can meet us there, but because we can do more things together. And of course with the electronics and the miracle of the airwaves, we can absolutely do some things together. We at Pilgrim have been engaged now for going on 4 years in our anti-racism book club, and that's done on Zoom. And we gather across the country. We have some people that Zoom in from Georgia and New Jersey, and why not Phoenix? We haven't chosen our next book yet, but I'll absolutely send you an invitation.
Maybe a Robbie P. Jones?
Oh, that was one of our first books, White Too Long, but I guess he has a new one out, so we should definitely do that. Well, not to delay the day too much, I am here, as David mentioned, with my lovely wife, Gail. Thank you for being with me. And here for the Board of Directors meeting of Compassion and Choices. So as a director, it's part of my duty and responsibility to spread the good news that this movement is growing, and I do believe one day we'll come here to Arizona. We'll hear more about that afterwards. I'm involved in this movement because I believe our society, our culture, our civilization is at a tipping point where the end of our lives can be lived with the same intention, purpose, clarity, dignity, and enthusiasm as with which we lived our lives. Too often we get to the end of our lives and we just lose control. We give over control to others, to the medical industry to tell us how to do and what to do, and we just are like people caught in a river and a stream that's flowing to a destination we do not know. And we look up, and the waterfall is upon us. I want to speak to you this morning from the theme of our organization, its vision, charting our end-of-life journey. Charting our end-of-life journey. Compassion and Choice's mission statement is as follows. Compassion and Choices improves care, expands options, and empowers everyone to chart their end-of-life journey. And our vision statement says, we are seeking a society that affirms life and accepts the inevitability of death, embraces expanded options for compassionate dying, and empowers everyone to choose end-of-life care that reflects their values, priorities, and beliefs. That's what we're about. That's what we are about. And so today I want to speak from a theological perspective. Why do we need a theological interpretation of medical aid in dying? Well, one reason is the main opposition to this movement is religious. I won't name any names. Roman Catholic Church, Mormon Church, Evangelical Church. Oh, I said I wasn't going to name any names. But they say these things without backing them up theologically. And so I felt it incumbent upon those of us in the movement to at least reflect theologically on that with which we are asserting. And so the first theological concept I'd like to share with you is something very difficult to grasp, something that's very challenging to understand. You ready? God made us mortal. When we were writing the mission statement, and everyone was all on board with a society that affirms life, and then some people wanted to strike the phrase and accepts the inevitability of death. And I stood up and said, we can't strike that because there are people around here that don't believe they're going to die. Or at least they act like it. And I believe that if we accept our mortality, that it enhances and strengthens the relationships that we have in our lives, and especially the relationships we have at the end of our lives. I've come to this movement from a long journey. I don't think all of us just wake up one day and say, yeah, I'm for that. That's why they call it a movement, because we grow into it, and there's certain things that happen in our lives, certain people we encounter, certain experiences we have with death and dying that make us step back and reassess. And as I look back across my life, I can see a few moments that open me up to the possibility of being a director of an organization called Compassion and Choices. And one of those was, I believe I was maybe 10 years old. And so obviously that was way back in the 1960s. Some of you were around then. And in the 1960s, we talked about the C word, cancer. No one wanted to talk about it out loud. And I don't remember the network or the program, but there was a special where this reporter was interviewing a man who had cancer and was being public about his journey toward the end of his life. And I'll never forget this. The reporter asked the gentleman, "How does it feel to be mortal?" And he responded with this simple sentence, "Well, we're all mortal. We are all mortal. God made us mortal. We are going to die." Medical aid in dying. First of all, a few technical things about it. Medical aid in dying is not suicide. Suicide is a mental illness that afflicts an otherwise healthy person who seeks to end their lives. Medical aid in dying is for a person that is dying, who directs their care in such a way that they can include a prescription that will bring an end to their lives on their own terms at a time and a place that they determine. To qualify in the states that have the law, and we refer to the experience as accessing the law. And the term of art for this procedure is medical aid in dying. One has to have a terminal diagnosis with which if left untreated, would result in your death within 6 months. It's the same qualification for hospice. And so once you have that doctor's approval or that doctor's diagnosis, and you make a request to that doctor, he says, "I hear your request for medical aid in dying, but I need you to tell somebody else too, so I'm not the only witness." And you make a second request, and then you put it in writing, and the doctor writes a prescription, and you get the prescription filled, and then you receive the medication, and then you do whatever you want with it, actually. Most people who receive the prescription never take it. But it brings comfort to them to know that if their condition becomes so painful, so unbearable, so distorting, that they simply cannot or do not wish to live in that condition, they can ingest the medication, and they must ingest it under the law. And after about a half an hour to an hour and a half at most, they go to sleep, and their life is over. But it forestalls many of the medical problems that people endure at the end of their lives. Medical aid in dying is the ultimate declaration in a new approach to medical practice called patient-directed care. Not patient-centered care. We tried that, and it turned out that the patient was at the center of a whole lot of people telling them what to do. This is the ultimate patient-directed care. And I want to commend to you a book. Barbara Coombs Lee, who was the founder of Compassion and Choices, wrote a fantastic book called Finish Strong. Any of you read it? Okay. Finish Strong, putting your priorities first at the end of life. It is a wonderful book. And maybe only about half a chapter are about medical aid in dying. It's really about, as we approach the end of our lives, making sure that we live the balance of our life, the years we have left, in a way that is fulfilling and that honors the way we've lived our lives up until that point. It is important that as we approach the end of life, we have conversations with our families so that our children are not arguing and fussing and fighting, as they will do, about what mama really wanted, when they're superimposing their own desires, their own theologies, their own values on you, and you've become helpless to articulate your own values Please, you must have these conversations while you can talk. And the most helpful chapter in her book is entitled, Talking About Death Won't Kill You. But we're all reluctant to talk about it because we cannot embrace the mortality that is real. And I don't need to tell you, you all have had experiences and stories of very difficult deaths, deaths that tear families apart at a time when they most need to lean and depend on one another. So I want to encourage you, if you get nothing more out of my sermon today, please start talking to your families about what you want. First of all, talk to yourself about what you want, and then share that. Invite your family to the conversation, a conversation that is not one and done, but that goes on until the end of your life. We need to start the conversation, and I hope to equip the saints to have this conversation. We don't know how to talk about death. And that's why I commend this book. I don't have them. You can order it on Amazon. Finish Strong, Barbara Coombs Lee. And the best way to have this conversation with your family is for each of your children's birthdays this year, give them that book, Finish Strong. And then at the end of the year, when all of your children have it, and they're around the Thanksgiving table or Christmas or New Year's, or whenever your whole family get together, you say, hey, let's talk about me finishing strong. So this is just one of the strategies, medical aid in dying, that can be employed to help you chart your end-of-life journey. And when we were talking about this as a phrase and a concept, I took it literally. I actually got out some paper and charted my end-of-life journey. And so I basically based it on the lifespan of my grandchildren. How long do I have to live to see Charlotte graduate from college? And then I had another grandchild. Okay, how long do I have to live to see VZ graduate from college? Then they had another baby, and I said, I better stay in shape. But there are many ways that we can take control of the end of our lives that simply are not talked about or shared. One of the ways that's been available for all time is voluntary cessation of eating and drinking. You can just stop. You don't need a law to do that. And it's a natural process. If you've ever experienced someone who approaches the end of their lives, they start refusing food and denying water, and that starts that death process or helps that death process to complete. And one of the tragedies in the medical industry is persons with Alzheimer's. Their own body knows that they've come to that place, and they start to turn away from the food, and some institutions will force feed them and prolong their suffering rather than accepting the inevitability or embracing the mortality that is ours. So there are many other methods, and again, we all have heard and know the tragedies that happen for people who cannot bear the ramifications and consequences of their illness and in their lives in so many tragic ways, shotguns and other things that devastate families because this method was not available. So while there are many methods, certainly the expeditious nature of medical aid in dying offers distinct advantages. So, what does the Bible say about medical aid in dying? Anybody have a Bible? No, it's really not needed because it doesn't say anything. But as I undertook this role of theologian for the board, I did search the scriptures. And this very strange story that was read so eloquently earlier is the only thing I found that bears on the question of medical aid in dying. And while classically what was read would be classified as euthanasia because an external agent ended Saul's life, but medical aid in dying is where we ingest voluntarily our own the medication to end our own life. But I still felt it had a lot of ramifications for this conversation. So I find this passage helpful in thinking about the biblical tradition and what it has to offer on death and dying. So you heard the story, but let me just summarize it. So Saul is fighting a war, and he's fighting against the Philistines, he and his sons. And the Philistines have killed his son Jonathan, Abinadab, and how'd you say it? Malchishua, the sons of Saul. And it says the battle pressed hard. And see, they didn't have, artillery back in the day, but their artillery was the bows and arrows. And the first round of the assault would be from these far flying, maybe 300, 400 meters. These arrows, they just rained down on the enemy. And so Saul had been struck by the archer. The arrow had pierced him and wounded him mortally. And he was dying. He says in the text, convulsions had already started. He knew, he had seen enough death in his life to know the signs and the signals. And so he says to his armor bearer, take your sword and end my life. His armor bearer refused. And so he fell on his own sword. But what he said to the armor bearer was that, see me through, I am dying. And those Philistines, they're on the way. And when they get to me, they are going to humiliate me. They're going to make sport of me. They're going to dismember me. They're going to torture me. So we're not fighting the Philistines last time I checked. Our enemy is not the Philistines, but our enemy is cancer. Our enemy is heart disease. And our enemies, if they catch up with us, will torture us, dismember us, bodily system by bodily system, humiliate us, and then kill us. And that's what I took from this story of Saul. He knew he was dying, and he wanted to end his life on his own terms. He saw no profit in allowing the natural course of things to torture, dismember, and humiliate him. So Saul fell on his own sword when he couldn't get the help that he needed. Now, this is one of those strange stories in the Bible. It's strange enough as it is, but guess what? It has two endings. So if you only read 1 Samuel chapter 31, he fell on his sword, you assume he died, and that was the end of the story. It also says the Philistines did catch up with him. They did behead him. They did torture and humiliate him. But then the first chapter of 2 Samuel tells a different story. It tells a story of an incomplete suicide, if you will. This Amalekite is walking by, and Saul says, hey, you, come here. I need your help. He says, what's going on? He says, I'm mortally wounded. I've fallen on my sword. Convulsions have started, but I'm still alive. Please finish my life. And he says, okay. And he ends Saul's life. Takes his crown, armlet, runs over to David, and tells David what happened. Now, I didn't have it read in the text because we had it long enough, but after David receives the information, now how did you know? And he tells him what he did. I found him wounded, dying, laying on his sword. He asked me to do this, and so I helped him out. Now, the end of that story is David orders his soldiers to kill the Amalekite. And see, some of our other theologians will say, aha, see, God didn't like what he did. But that's not what the text says or means. David says explicitly to him, how dare you lift your hand against God's anointed? And as you all know, to be anointed is a special thing. The king was anointed by the high priest. The high priest was anointed into that office. And that's who the anointed are. So what David was really saying is, okay, I see you helped out King Saul, but I don't want anybody else getting the idea that you can kill a king. That's all that was about. And so these two endings, I think, give us some space to reflect on how we live our lives. I have another moment in my life that helped me get to where I am. My father died in 2011. That was before the law was passed in 2015 in California. But I learned a lot that helped me in this movement from his death and from his dying. He had prostate cancer, and that's very common among older men. He was 88. He had lived a good, long life. But we weren't ready for him to die because his mother lived to 99, and his father lived to 106. So we just knew he was going to make 100, but his prostate cancer spread beyond the capsule, as they say, and began to metastasize into other parts of his body. And I'll never forget a conversation my siblings and I had with the oncologist. The oncologist had us on speakerphone. We were all gathered around, and the oncologist said, "I've got good news and bad news." We said, "Good news? Our father's dying. What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, the bad news first. The cancer has spread beyond the capsule. It spread to his bones, and it spread to his liver." Okay, so what's the good news? He said, the good news is that it spread to his liver, because death from liver cancer is relatively peaceful, painless. You just kind of go to sleep. Death from bone cancer is excruciating. It's painful. The tumors grow on your spine and sometimes break your back. And the only relief, the only palliative care is to numb you out completely with narcotics, and sometimes even that cannot stop the pain. And that's how you live until you die. So the good news was that his liver cancer would take his life before the bone cancer got too bad. And we already started to see my father wincing, because they call them hot spots, if you've known someone with bone cancer. He had a hot spot on his ankle, and so we could see him just starting, but the liver cancer was going to be the good news. So my father's in the hospital. We had this conversation with his oncologist, and all of you know, this doctor doesn't talk to that doctor, right? So, and my father had not accessed hospice yet, because what did my sister say? And you've heard it from your family members. Don't give up. Keep trying. Which denies the dying person the aid and comfort that they need and deserve at the end of their lives. But that's not the time to have the conversation. And she was our parents' primary caregiver. And so my father's in the hospital, and he had two requests that he repeated over and over in these final weeks. I want to go home. I want to go home. I want to go either to my home on 12th Street, or I want to go home to my Heavenly Father in heaven, but I don't want to die in the hospital. How do they say it? You ain't got to go home, but I want to get up out of here. That was his wish. But the hospital would not release him. Why? Because they were still treating his liver cancer. They would not release him until the health of his liver, as measured by some indicators, you had to reach a certain number, 29 or something like that. And so they were treating it to get his numbers up in order to release him. But the oncologist said it was the liver cancer that was going to be his salvation. And so I'm in this very strange circumstance where my father has prostate cancer and liver cancer, and I'm sitting there rooting, come on, liver cancer. Come on, liver cancer. And so we finally got him in the hospice, and we finally got them to say, okay, we will discharge him if we can just get his numbers to touch so that we're not liability. So finally they treated him. His numbers just got up enough for them to discharge him, and they sent him home. But before he went home, my mother and I visited his primary care doctor. My father was supposed to walk his niece, his granddaughter, my niece, down the aisle at the wedding in New York in August, and this was July. And so my mother asked the doctor point blank, will he be able to walk her down the aisle? And he finally said to her, no, he's not going to make it. And her response surprised me. She said, I'm so glad you told me. I'm so glad you told me. And so when we went back to his room, all the grandchildren were there. And I was able to actually perform the wedding right there in the hospital room. I sent all the girl cousins out, and they took the flowers from my father's bedside, and all the boy cousins lined up. There wasn't a dry eye in the hospital, and they walked her in, and I performed the wedding, and I said, who gives this woman to be married to this man? And my father from his bed was able to say, I do. Then we got him home. He had all his family around him. He was able to ask for some of his favorite foods from childhood. How many country folk we got here? Nobody raised in the country? All right, y'all might know what I'm talking about. My father loved cornbread and buttermilk. I never understood that, but he asked for cornbread and buttermilk. So when you know the end is coming, you can do those things that are fulfilling and bring your life to an end with the dignity, the compassion, and even the hope that your children will be able to be blessed by your passing. I was blessed by his passing. And so our movement is about helping all of us chart our end-of-life journey so that we can come to the end of life with the same intentionality, the same purpose, and the same enthusiasm with which we lived our lives. And so that's what we want for every person. Medical aid in dying is not for everyone, but not only does it give comfort to those who never take the medication, I submit to you, it gives comfort to all of us, whether we ever go to the doctor, because we know if we live in California, it is available. So we all benefit from it. So I encourage you, get the book, talk to your children, talk to yourself, chart your own end-of-life journey. Literally. Write it out. Mark it. What do I want to accomplish? Bucket list. Who do I want to see? What do I want to do before I die? And I submit to you that Jesus encourages us to chart our end-of-life journey every day. And we do it with the simple prayer that you sang a few moments ago. When we pray, O divine Creator, holy are you. Your empire, come. Your will, please be done in my life today, so that I might catch a glimpse of your heaven. Give me a meal just for today. Forgive us as we forgive others, that I may end this day with a clear conscience. Don't test me. I'm not up for it. But deliver our world from the evils that plague us, especially on November 5th. But if not, you are forever, and so is your love. When we pray the prayer of Jesus, we are charting our end-of-life journey, because Jesus says every day we should be ready. Every day we should complete our lives or feel complete, so that if we don't make it to the next day, we will have lived a life worth living. Jesus charted his end-of-life journey, didn't he? Didn't he decide how he was going to end his life? Oh, yes, he could have run away. Some people said he could have called 10,000 angels. But no, he walked to the cross to affirm his faith in a life of love. Put love first here at Fountains Church. He walked to the cross to affirm his faith in a life of love and to remind us that life is not measured by its duration, but by the impact of its love. Life is not measured by its duration, but by the impact of its love. Jesus did not live a long life, but long live the love that he lived. Jesus did not live a long life, but his love reverberates across the millennium. Jesus did not hold office, but the impact of his love liberated billions from the oppression of the state. Jesus did not have a medical degree, but the impact of his love has healing power. Jesus was not a billionaire, but the impact of his love has pulled billions out of poverty. Jesus was not an undertaker, but the impact of his love has delivered us from death to life, true life. Amen.
Thank you, Madison, and I really encourage you to stay afterwards so that we can hear more from Madison and Mark as well about some of the details that you might be interested in and some of the resources that you're able to find online and otherwise. So after we do our closing song, let's get some quick refreshments and come right back for our Q&A. Let's stand together and sing.
Sets us on a journey to discover, dream, and grow. Lead us as you led your people in the desert long ago. Journey inward, journey outward. Stir the spirit, stretch the mind. Love for God and self and neighbor marks the way that Christ defined. Exploration brings new insights, changes choices we must face. Give us wisdom in deciding, mindful always of your grace. Should we stumble, lose our bearings, find it hard to know what's right, we regain our true division, focused on the Jesus light. And a longing for the old days, grant the visions that we lack. Once we've started on this journey, there can be no turning back. Let us travel light, discarding excess baggage from the past. Cherish only what's essential, choosing danger that will last. When we set up camp and settle to avoid love's risk and pain, you disturb complacent comfort, pull the tent pegs up again. Keep us traveling in the knowledge you are always at our side. Give us courage for the journey, Christ our goal.
And Christ our guide. Let's join together in our words of blessing. Go into the world, dance, laugh, sing, and create. Go into the world, risk, explore, discover, and love. Go into the world, belief, hope, struggle, and remember. Amen. Go in peace. See you back here in a few minutes.